Hey guys, thanks for joining us for this month's episode of Life and Leadership. Every month, we will release new content about the behind the scenes in our own lives and also talk about various leadership principles that we found to be beneficial in our life and ministry.
We're also excited to have the opportunity to talk to some of our good friends and fellow leaders during this segment of our podcast. This will help give us a wide range of perspectives from leaders that are doing incredible things in their own roles and contexts. Thanks for joining us.
Well, hey, we're so excited to be here with Kyle Rogers from Pittsburgh, Kansas, for our Life and Leadership podcast. Kyle and I go way back. So when he was my pastor, and I was your youth pastor, and that seems like 10 years ago, doesn't it?
It does. It does. It seems like there's been so much that's happened since then.
I know, man. But dude, as we were talking about, right now, the idea of leading through the unknown and leading through change, there's a lot of unknown going on and there's a lot of change happening right now. And when I look at you and I see who you are and what you do, I think you have mastered this topic in a way that not very many can. I know you're humble and you're like, man, I'm just trying to figure it out like anyone else. But I know a lot of people are thinking like, okay, what would Kyle do? There have been many times I've been in conversations with people and they're like, man, Kyle's just really good at navigating through this. And you're a counselor, man. You really are. Like you listen to people and you hear them out and you just kind of help them figure out what it is that, they're really trying to ask and really trying to do. And I know you've done that for me. I know Madi has benefited from you just from our friendship. I know there's times where we've talked and I'm like, what would Jesus do and what would Kyle do, right? Yeah, I'm serious, But man, we're just honored that you're here today. And man, I would love for you just kind of give everybody some context because, man, your church has just grown like crazy. Yeah. You've been there a long time. Tell everybody your situation.
Well, no, first of all, hey, thanks for having me. Yeah. This is fun.
For sure, man.
This is like, you guys are like family to me.
Yeah.
And so it's been just great I'm honored to be here as well.
Thanks, man.
So yeah, Dylan was with us for a while. Just being honest today, Dylan's kind of bragging on me for whatever reason, but it was just so good to have Dylan there. And I just remember being a little down depressed when Dylan left. But God's used you guys in amazing ways. Yeah. But since Dylan's left, God has continued to bless us. I went on sabbatical a couple years ago, just trying to wrestle with, okay, what do you have for us next?
Mm-hmm.
And the questions are, do we plant a church?
Yeah.
Do we build? And God during sabbatical said, yep.
Yeah.
And so we're in the process of doing those things. We planted a church, I guess close to 2 years ago now.
Wow.
Something
That's
like
crazy.
That.
I can't believe it's been 2 years.
I know, and maybe I'm a little off on that. 1.5 to 2 years, something like that. And I think we planted it with like 37 people. Mm-hmm. And right before COVID hit, right? We all understand COVID. Right. But before COVID hit, I think it was around 120
It's
people.
amazing.
That's awesome.
So it's been growing.
In a small community.
Yeah.
Yeah, in a small community. And we're kind of doing like a simulcast thing, similar to Life Church's concept of, so about 80% of the time we simulcast the message in, and then 20% of the time, Pastor Sean and Brooke Elwood do a great job.
Yeah.
And so they're the campus pastors over there. So we're
so
doing
cool.
that, and then we're in the process of raising funds for a new building.
Right.
And so things are going really well.
That's awesome.
Good.
Plugging along, just like everybody else trying to figure out this COVID thing.
Right.
I know. Well, it's so cool that you mentioned Brooke and Sean, and they're related to Madi.
Yes.
Family.
And they're awesome.
They're amazing.
And so when you told me that, hey, I'm really considering these two, I thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
And dude, they've really grown.
They have.
And they've just thrived, in that community. And what's so cool is, I don't know, I think you know this story, but it was my last year of being a youth pastor at Pitt, and we were at NYC.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there. I don't remember who was speaking, but it was one of the last sessions, and all of a sudden, man, the Spirit of God came on me and said, "Go and affirm Sean Elwood." I'm like, man, I don't know Sean that good. He's a cool dude. I just don't really know him. And listen, we're in this big arena. I don't know if I'll be able to find him. And I turn around, and he's like,
there he is,
2 rows behind me. And so I go up and I just start praying, and just like, Lord, I know you have a calling on this guy's life. Don't know what it is, but I believe you're calling him maybe to ministry. I'm just, that's what, prophetic word is. Like you don't know, but you're just, Lord, I think this is what you are calling me to do right now. And so anyways, didn't really know if that even made sense to him. Well, what's crazy is he ended up telling me later on that God told him, hey, Dylan has a word for you at NYC.
That's crazy.
Just get ready. And he said he was getting frustrated at me. He's like, dude, give me my word. But I didn't know yet. But it was that final word. But what's so cool is it ended up being at Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And he called me early on before he moved. He's like, so man, what do you think about, us going to Pittsburgh? What's Kyle like? And I just started grinning.
You had to lie to him, right?
Yeah, I'm like, dude, Kyle's a good guy. I mean, kind of, No, but it was so cool for me. I'm like, bro, there's not a better circumstance for you to go into. And that's what's so awesome with me. You guys took a chance on me, man. I was a kid, I was in college and going back and forth. And I remember it didn't make sense on paper. And people probably, were asking, what are you doing, hiring this guy? But, and you guys took a chance on me. And when I got there, it was just the best culture ever, man. You love me. But I love telling the story because, this is Life and Leadership Podcast,
Right.
And so, man, I remember my first day, there at the office, you weren't there. And you go to Bible school and, I was at James River, so I had the hands-on experience, but I didn't want to screw up. And so that first day I called Kyle, I'm like, man, so, what do you want me to do today? And he just started explaining things. He goes, man, I didn't hire you to babysit you. I got to.
He's quoted that so many times. I love
it.
it.
At first, I'm like, dude. And then I was like, all right, though. That's right. It's time to go. And I did. But that next day, it was staff meeting. And then I got like all this structure. But I remember that was my leadership moment. Like, listen, I got one chance, and we got to get at it, But dude, it's crazy because like those are some of my favorite times of my life, being at Pitt. Obviously I was single at the time, and I just gave everything I had to those students, and now they're, they're in college and getting married and all that. But just to watch how you guys have continued to grow has been so cool, And what I think what's so cool about you is a lot of people don't realize how long you've been at Pitt. So kind of speak into that.
Yeah, so right out of college, I went to St. Louis for a couple of years to Ferguson Nazarene Church. A lot of people remember the rioting in Ferguson that happened with all that went down however long ago there. And so basically after I was there for 2 years and then came to Pittsburgh in 2003. Yeah. And since 2003, I've been there. I've played a bunch of different roles. I was the youth pastor there for quite a while, and then moved into more of an associate role. And then I think in 2014, moved into the lead pastor role. Man. And so, yeah.
But that's awesome. what I love about that. You say that so humbly. Yeah. But dude, it wasn't all glamorous like it is today. I'm not saying it wasn't good.
Yeah.
But like I've heard stories where you're, in the bathroom and you're like, Lord, am I still called here? Isn't that right?
Yeah. In the very beginning. Yeah.
And you just kind of stayed with it. And I think that's so good. And I learned that from you of like, you got to have grit. I remember us having that conversation when I'm like, Christianity and leadership takes grit. And dude, people see the Kyle now, see the big church and the staff, but dude, it wasn't always like that, man.
No. I think, for the longest time, I remember thinking, God, why did you call me back here? I've talked to different people in our church about that over the years. And I remember the Lord, basically I got to a place where I started to realize, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be is, I didn't call you here to be a part of the problem. I called you here to be a part of the solution. Mm-hmm. And, and then there was it's always been a healthy church, but, God just began to breathe into me some direction. And so, it's been a journey. There's been a lot of chapters, you think of your life in terms of chapters,
That's good.
And there's been a lot of chapters at Pittsburgh and still more to be written.
That's good, man.
So, yeah.
I think something so cool, you and Pastor Jim Sucraw were
amazing
essentially
guy.
Co-pastors.
Yeah.
You were still doing youth, but he was transitioning out. Everybody knew you were about to take the leadership role, but you guys navigated for a few years, in that role, right?
Yeah, and really what made that work was mutual respect and love for each other.
Yeah.
To this day, I'll still call him every once in a while and say, hey, help me with this, or what are you thinking on this? He allowed me to use the abilities God's given me, and I had no problem affirming him because he's like a dad to me, and because he deserves those things that we would always brag on him about. Yeah. So it was really, I think the reason it worked was we both, had mutual respect for each other.
Right.
Still do.
Dude, he's one of the best guys I've ever met in my life.
He is.
But dude, like, eventually Pastor Sleen and I planted the well together. We're doing a CoPastor model, and there, amazing things within that, challenges within that.
Yeah.
But man, I watched you and Jim just do things together, and lead together. And that really helped me and Selena, just navigating like, okay, this is what we do. And I just think it's so cool. Your guys' humility to be able to just lead that way.
Right.
And then you stepped up, and then Jim still goes, comes to church there,
Sure.
A lot of the times I think, and just to watch how you guys just navigated that so, seamlessly, dude, that speaks a lot about your guys' character and leadership, which I think is so cool. But, you're talking about Corona and COVID-19, right? That, I guess, has some more proper way of saying that, right? I saw a meme that says coronavirus. If you say that, you look like this. COVID-19, you're like this, right?
Sure.
And then Rona.
Yeah, Rona. Then there's Rona. But dude, like, you're in the trenches right now.
Yeah.
We're in evangelism. We lost. I think we're supposed to be in Arkansas right now. Just tons of events, and we've gotten innovative on our own end, and those doors are starting to open up again. But like, you're a lead pastor of a thriving large church. You guys are doing things. What's it been like for you, man?
I think you said it, Dylan, in the beginning when you talked about unknown, unfamiliar, uncertain. It's been different.
Yeah.
I think it's a day right now. I think pastors would agree with this, where I can't think of another time in my lifetime where the church is more needed. And yet at the same time, I can't think of a time just like this where, your church is gathering, but they're not gathering physically.
Right.
And then as you gather back, you paint this picture in your mind of how it's going to be, and it's not that way. I'm not painting this as good or bad. I'm just kind of describing the situation. And,
it's real.
People come in, and some are like ready to return to normal. Some want to return to normal, but they just can't for whatever reason.
Right.
Then you have some that are full of anxiety, but are there. And then you have some that aren't.
Yeah.
And so it's just navigating that and embracing what is, and not spending all your time. I mean, I'm telling you something I'm telling myself.
Yeah.
And not spending all your time wishing that things were the way they were.
Right.
And spending all your time there.
Right.
Versus saying, God, what do you have for us now? Even though this season isn't as attractive in my brain to how it used to be. And so I didn't give you any answers there.
No,
that's kind of where I'm at, and where we're at is just like everybody else.
I appreciate the honesty, because like sometimes you don't have the answer. You're rolling with it.
Yeah.
I've just, whether you know that about yourself or not, I'm sure you do, but like you do an exceptional job of leading through change. And I was there when you really took over, the reins, and there were a lot of changes that need to be made. Like, not that it wasn't good, but it's just going from here to here. Man, I watched you take some big steps of faith, where they weren't the popular opinions. Like, where do you think that came from in you? Like, I know, like, God-given talent and ability, but man, like, there comes a point in time where you got to take the step of faith, and you were willing to take those steps to make those changes, within leadership style in the church. Where'd that come from, you think?
Well, I mean, I would say the Lord, from the standpoint that I've always said in ministry, I feel like a sailboat that's sitting out in the water. And if the Holy Spirit blows wind into the sails, we can move as quick as he wants to.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if the Holy Spirit isn't moving us, we're just kind of sitting there.
Yeah.
And so I look back over the times where we maybe made some big changes, or navigated something that was challenging. It was, it wasn't that hard if we knew that God was in it.
It's good.
But at the same time, no matter how much something made sense on paper, if we didn't feel like we had gotten clarity from God about it, we wouldn't move on it.
Right.
And so I think, to kind of speak to your question, I think it's just walking in step with the Spirit, I guess.
Yeah.
And I don't claim to always be perfect at that.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that, every pastor needs to care deeply about, is what is God up to?
Yeah.
And how can I get involved in that?
That's
and
good,
I think
man.
that's kind of, I don't know if I say it that way when I pray that, but it's just, Lord, I don't want to miss something.
Yeah.
What can we do
That's good.
to act, to be active in your kingdom?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Me being, I think 21 years old at the time, 2021, I was a young pup in staff meeting, and I'm watching these, grown men lead, and I was just really taking it in. And what I loved about that role was I felt like I was obviously able to bring some energy, but man, I really absorbed a lot. I was like, okay, this is my first, ministry position. I want to just learn. And dude, I don't even know if you know this, but obviously you sat here at your chair. I would always sit in this little round chair, the comfy chair. I was supposed to be a servant, but I got the best chair.
Yeah, still have it.
But dude, my favorite times was just in staff meeting, and we'd go around, and then there would always hit that point where we were all looking at you. You were the leader, and we would talk and talk and talk. But at the end of the day, there's a leader, and we would look at you, and just like you shared your honesty right there. Sometimes you don't know. And Craig Rochelle, we were talking about that beforehand. He always says people want to follow a leader that's always real more than always right. And that was something I respected you. Sometimes like, D, I don't know. And I was like,
yeah.
That was good for me because, a lot of times people, I think, fail because they just refuse to acknowledge I don't know. And I just remember in those moments sitting there in this chair, I'm like, I'm honored right now to be able to sit here and take that in, But really, you were navigating, through new territory as well,
Yeah, that's true. Very true.
It's real.
And I think, the reality is that maybe I think the first step towards figuring out what we're supposed to do is to be honest about we don't know what we're supposed to do. We can look at examples and we can see what this person's doing or what they're doing. But the reality is at the end of all of it, Lord, what is it you have?
That's good.
And I think if we come from that angle, we can get to a point where we can hide behind, I don't know.
Yeah.
There's the other side of that where I don't really want to do anything because I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So it's easier for me to just say, I don't know. That way I don't have to act.
Right. That's good.
But then there's the other side of it to say, okay, I want to act, but I want it to be in step with you.
Yeah.
And being willing to say, okay, God, until you let me know what it is, I'm just going to wait. And I think that's hard. And, bringing it back to your question about COVID, that's what's challenging is some of the vision that we have, our 5-year plan is I don't feel like we're supposed to throw that out. I also don't think we're supposed to push hard on some of that financial goals of all that, those kinds of things with building and things like that, because we're just kind of this wait and see mode. And so, okay, Lord, what is your plan? What are you wanting to do? Another thing I was thinking as we're sitting here talking, I think leaders that are going to struggle the most during this time are those of us who struggle staying fluid, staying teachable. They were looking for a place to set up camp. I think during this time, we've talked a lot about this with our staff and just in general is we have to stay flexible.
Yeah.
Hey, we're in quarantine. Hey, now we're not in quarantine. Hey, cold and flu season comes. Are we in quarantine again?
Right.
Hey, this was a plan we were going to do. No, we're going to do it. Well, maybe we are. Maybe this is what we're going to do. I think staying fluid and being willing to let God shape things.
Right. Being teachable.
Yeah.
That's good.
It's real. Like, within this, unprecedented times, right? Everybody said that, but it's real. You first you have COVID-19, then you have the murder hornets, right? But then, as of recent, you look at the racial oppression, injustice. And, I'm just trying to, hear the Lord here because it wasn't even part of the plan. But here's the deal, man. You took a big step of faith recently addressing that. Man, why don't you share, kind of what you did there?
Yeah, I'm like, this is crazy. This is crazy. No, that's just been on my heart. I mean, even before COVID hit, it's been on my heart for some time. I grew up hearing slurs as a kid, just in general.
Right.
And it'd been on my heart for some time to have that discussion, to start that discussion. And one of the things that I talked about with the panel, was very educational, informative for me. But one of the things that they talked about and I talked about was, and Stephen Furtick mentioned this in his conversation that he had, and I didn't realize it at the time, but man, it was affirming, is there's no perfect way to talk about some topics. There just isn't.
Right.
I I mean, whether it's the topic of racism or different topics that we might think of, sometimes it's not about having the perfect conversation. As a parent, sometimes you have to have those conversations, right? The birds and the bees is a conversation we should have with our kids, but maybe we don't do that conversation perfectly. It's not about having the perfect conversation. It's about having the conversation. I wouldn't say that some of the conversations I had with my kids, like that was the best way I could possibly have that conversation. No, I had the conversation. And I think that's one of the things. And making it not a one-time thing, but an ongoing just dialogue. And the goal really of that conversation wasn't that everybody was going to say, that was done perfectly. The goal was what actually even happened in my own home. Was we went home and we had some other family over and we had a 2-hour discussion informally about the topic and how do we view this correct way. And man, this comment really stretched me, and just having conversation. And so sometimes the goal is, especially that day, was just about getting it started and hoping that, and we even defined the wins that day. Hey, it's a win if we go home and we talk about this, that it doesn't just end here. It's a win if we come in listening to understand, not listening to respond, and so on. But it was a good day.
For the audience who doesn't know, kind of explain like the details of what you did, kind of like Q&A and all that.
Yeah. So basically, obviously, we're all aware of what happened with George Floyd and the fallout after that. Just felt the Holy Spirit speaking to us that we needed to hit the pause button on the series that we were in, and we needed to talk about it. And so Karen Campbell, who was in our youth group. I remember
she's awesome.
Just
I love Karen.
Hanging out with Karen when she was in our youth group. Karen was going to Mid-American National University, and I reached out to her. I said, hey, what do you think about having a conversation? She said, I would love to. And she talked to a couple of her friends who were interested in coming down, and so we put that together and kind of went from there. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
What I love about that is it's unpopular. Granted, just for clarification, he didn't do it because Stephen Furtick did it, right?
No.
He didn't even know.
I didn't even know that was. Once we scheduled ours.
Well, Stephen Furtick copied you, is what happened.
No. Once we scheduled ours, then I'm like, oh, they did one. He'd already done one. So
it just showed that the Lord was pressing people's hearts to do it,
Yeah.
But what I love about that and this idea of leading through the unknown and change, you have a series. This is where you're headed. This is what you're preaching this week. And the Lord's like, no, you got to address this, That's unpopular. That's not easy. That's not fun to do. But yet it was necessary, but it doesn't mean that it's always the popular opinion. It doesn't mean that even if it's the right thing to do, it doesn't mean that it's people applaud it. And I know you've gotten some great feedback from that, but man, chances are you probably didn't get, you might have some who maybe thought that wasn't wise or you never know. But I think what's so cool is, granted, yes, could you handle this different or this? Just like you said, like if you have a conversation with your kids, it doesn't mean you had the best conversation, but you addressed it. And that's what I appreciate about your heart so much is you want to address things that you feel like you need to address. And you've never backed down from that, which I've always admired, but you don't do it in a bulldog or bulldozer way. You come at it with a heart of humility, which is very rare, and I just appreciate that about you. You're not scared. You're not going back down, but you're super, humble within that. Where does that come from?
I don't know. I never really thought about that. I would say, though, my passion is collaboration.
Yeah.
The worst thing you can do to me is put me on an island without people. Now don't get me wrong. Sometimes I enjoy my time alone, but reality is I'm an extroverted person and I like people, I like being around people. And so collaboration is really important. And we all have things that make us tick. And so for me, I like feedback, and I can listen. I can be a great leader, but I can also be a great follower, and so I say a great leader, like that sounded bad, but I mean, like I can lead.
That's why you're on this podcast, man.
Follow. Yeah. Well, I can lead and I can also follow.
Right.
And I think that for me, it's just being able to collaborate and listen. I am typically open-minded by nature. So when I hear a perspective that's maybe not my perspective, my immediate response isn't that's wrong or I don't agree with that. My immediate response is help me understand.
Right.
And I'm not saying that's a good or bad thing. That's just me.
Yeah.
And so I think we can learn a lot from each other by just listening.
I love it.
Without trying to respond. I mean, we've all been somewhere where we say something, and as soon as we're done,
right.
In fact, honestly, Dylan, in preparing for that panel discussion, there's an African-American pastor there in town that I've become really good friends with. And, and he modeled some things to me and shared some things with me. He watched the discussion.
Yeah.
And I said, what'd you think of it? And he goes, I thought it was good. He goes, unrelated to the topic.
Yeah.
He goes, when someone says something to you, don't immediately respond. Like give that a chance for people to think about. And I'm like, okay.
I suck, I know.
Yeah.
No.
So, we're always learning. This. I mean, Peyton Manning had a coach until he retired.
Right.
Not just when he was learning. So
that was something I learned from you early on. I remember, and you meant it in the best way possible, but like the youth group was growing like crazy.
Yeah.
A lot of great things were happening. And I remember like one night, like we had, more kids than we've ever had. I mean, we had a lot of students. And I remember Kyle's like, oh, it's awesome. He goes, so how do you think we could get this many? And it wasn't about just getting as many kids as possible, but like his teaching there was, that's great, but man, there's more souls out there.
Yeah.
Right.
How can we get better? And I was like, dude, what the heck, man? Like, but then I remember thinking, he's right. Yeah, I didn't like it. And you would say things at times. I mean, you said one thing that I've stolen from you. I've given you credit a few times, but then I just started taking it as my own, right? But man, you talked about every relationship has a bank account.
I heard you quote this like 2 days ago.
Yeah, I quoted this morning at one of my meetings. Break that down for us.
Well, I don't remember who said it. I mean, there's no original idea.
Kyle Rogers.
No, somebody else said it, or at least along those lines. Right. But basically just the idea of, credit deposits and withdrawals. Yeah. And again, I'm not the originator of that. But the idea behind that is every time you meet someone's need, or, we were all familiar with the love languages, acts of service, physical touch, and so on, you're making a deposit when you encourage someone. As a leader, you make deposits and then you make withdrawals. Yeah. So if you come in and you say, hey, we're like, for us, we're going to plant a church in Columbus. Yeah. We had one family, Maddie, that lived in Columbus. It wasn't like 50 families or 2 or 3. I mean, one family.
Wow.
Well, that's a withdrawal. Now, hopefully there's equity in the account, so there's not a negative balance.
Right.
But the reality is, no matter how you look at it, no matter what you are, what kind of leader you are, you're making a withdrawal because some people didn't hear from God about that.
Right.
It's not that God didn't talk to them about that,
Right.
And so you're making a withdrawal. And so you want to make sure in general, right, that we make more credit. It's the same way with relationships with family. We're all going to make withdrawals at times because we're not perfect.
Right.
But we need to be constantly storing money away. We need to be constantly making those deposits so that there's money in there, right?
That's good.
So again, I didn't originate that, but yeah, that's kind of the guts of it.
Well, I love it because it applies to every relationship, whether it be marriage, whether it be congregational, or your staff. Like you've got to have that, and so thanks for letting me steal that. But no, like I bring that up because you planted a church, and before that you're praying, you're wrestling. Do we do this or not? Right. And there are many things along the way that, you kind of thought of and what is it that, we should do. But eventually you had to make a decision, and good or bad, you had to own the consequences, right? Well, this has been a phenomenal situation, but risk was involved, and leadership requires risk, and I remember, way back when on staff, we were praying about, it was a coffee shop, should we do this or this? And we didn't know, but we ended up walking the town. Was it like 3 times or?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Most people probably are familiar with The Circle Maker.
Yeah.
You might've introduced me to that book. I don't remember, but it was by Mark Batterson.
Yeah.
And the concept was, if you feel God leading you to something, to make circles around it and pray for it. And so Dylan was on our staff, and we would walk, Maddie, like 5 miles every Tuesday.
Yeah. Wow.
And we would pray over a certain area of our community. And there was a lot there that we felt like this is where we're supposed to put this commercial coffee house.
Yeah.
We circled it, but we would also we would also make laps around the community that it impacted.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well, they kept raising the price of the lot, so
Right.
we ended up backing off of that. And then, I don't know, a year or two later, this house came up for sale that was adjacent to our property that was within the circle.
Wow.
And so
Isn't that good?
That's
Gives
so
me
awesome.
goosebumps,
yeah, I
man.
felt
I
like
love
God
it.
was I felt like God was saying it's east, and God's like, no, it's
Yeah.
north.
Right.
You know,
Well, and here's what I love
That's
about that
awesome.
story, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember we did that, and then I remember you were just like, did we miss it? Like,
yeah,
like,
dude,
like you were kind of getting beat, like the enemy was kind of beating you up,
Mm-hmm.
and you were beating yourself up, and we're just praying through and talking through. By this time, I had transitioned, and then all of a sudden, I remember talking to you, and just that passion just came out of your mouth, and you're like, man, you talked about the house and all this stuff, and it's like the Lord was just like, no, I heard you,
Yeah.
but it just wasn't time yet, And I just wrote a devotion this past Monday, talking about waiting on the Lord. It's not fun, right?
Right.
But man, it's part of it, and He's in the waiting. We've heard
Yeah.
that song,
Yeah.
He's in the waiting, and
good,
for
Dylan.
me to watch you from afar, stay faithful, stay true, and then watch the Lord veil this. I'm like, okay, He did hear from God. It wasn't time yet, and now, I mean, how many students do you have throughout the week?
Before COVID, we were having, and it depends on the time of the
Right.
year,
Yeah.
but as many as 300 go through in a week.
Wow.
Right.
That's
And
amazing.
visit. You have some that are, what do you call them? They come in more than once.
Right.
But at the same time, it's been an outstanding ministry.
Man.
Pastor Age, our college pastor,
Yeah.
does a great job with them. But yeah, and I remember there was a season there, D, where I couldn't even drive by that lot
Wow.
hardly without getting just almost sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
Wow.
No one else bears that. I mean,
Right.
but I remember that, yeah. And then to realize that's one of those things where in the middle of this COVID thing, in the middle of
Yeah.
other things, you can turn around and you can kind of see like, hey, God was faithful here.
Right.
He can be faithful there. And obviously
That's
we're
good.
talking about church stuff,
Yeah.
but really that would apply to anything
Anything.
someone's going through.
Yeah.
Well, I bet. I mean, that's kind of like your stack of stones. Because remember, we
Yeah.
grabbed a stone.
Yeah.
After
Yeah.
walking, and it's like that now is a reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time you see that coffee shop and see students drinking, they're not just drinking coffee in the name of Jesus.
Right.
They're getting discipled in
Right.
that community. That's got to be a faith builder for you.
It is. It makes me think I need to do a series called Keep Stacking.
There we go.
That's good.
That's awesome.
Kyle and I
That's
will dream with each other. We'll text, each other. Hey, what do you
Yeah.
think about this?
I hear a word and I automatically will think series.
Right.
I don't know why.
Every once in a while, he'll throw out some silly one, like
Yeah.
just messing around.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
start cracking up.
But no, I mean, I do think it's true though. Like you're saying, stacking stones,
Yeah.
because sometimes you're coming up to a stone, you're like, okay, I don't have that stone in my
Right.
Like I don't have one that big.
Yeah.
Right.
I've got stones here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But that one's, I don't have any that relate to that one. I
Right.
think just a reminder that God is faithful.
Yeah.
Man,
And He will continue to be faithful,
that's good.
whether or not we have that specific. Sometimes we'll look back and say, okay, God came through for us before.
Right.
Look at all the stones that look like this one we're facing.
Right.
And there's other times you're like, there's no other stone like that, and yet God is still faithful.
That's
Yeah.
good. I think of how well you guys have done with technology over the years. It's not of recent. A lot of people, they've been playing catch up. Corona hits. Oh crap.
Yeah,
Online giving. How do we implement that?
Right.
Video announcements.
yeah,
Filming sermons. Well, you guys didn't anticipate COVID-19 pandemic happen,
yeah,
but you're ready.
Yeah.
yeah,
And I don't even know if you've thought of this. I'm sure you have in some degree, but you've just been leading like this for so long that it becomes natural. For me, though, being the young guy on the team early on, I watched you take financial steps that weren't popular at the time. I remember being in the board meeting where you created this position for Steve Enoch, and at that point in time, they're like, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And imagine life without your Steve
Yeah.
Enoch, now.
Yeah.
But I watched you take those steps, and you knew we're not here yet.
yeah,
But one day we're going to be here. But, like I said, what you do today will get you to where you want to be down the road.
Yeah.
And you did that. And we're talking years ago, like 6, 7 years ago, or no, about 5 or 6. And now you're, obviously you've been hit
Yeah.
like all other churches, but you've been ready
Yeah.
Do talk about that.
Yeah, that speaks to our board because in fairness to them, there wasn't a lot of media and technology directors out there. So I don't in any way, shape, or form discredit them for asking the question,
Right.
What would a media person do? Because at that time, in our culture where we're located at, that was just not a thing. And so they took a step of faith with me and with our leadership team to do it. So it was a joint thing. However, I was just at a conference, skipped out of one of the sessions, and was talking to a pastor, actually John Hauser, who just is taken on a new journey. He was at Prairie Heights for several years, and just telling him our story. And he began to talk to me and breathe life into me. And then through all of that, just began to pray, and God just began to tell us, like, we need to do this. And so, of course, Steve is amazing, does a great job. I don't know if I wish I could say it was anticipatory leadership, that I was forecasting and all of that, but I can't say that. I can just say we wanted to improve our online.
Right.
We wanted to have a presence. We knew, obviously, that things weren't just going that way. They were that way. And why aren't churches involved in this?
Right.
It's kind of like when you're fishing. If the hole that you've always caught the fish in, if they're not biting there, why don't you move to where they're at?
Right.
Instead of they're saying, no, I caught a fish there one time.
Yeah.
Right.
So we didn't used to catch fish online, so why would we do that now?
Right.
I think the churches and groups of people that are willing to say it's not about the bait, it's not about the boat,
Right.
it's about finding the fish.
That's
Right.
good.
And so
really
that was
good.
that was our motivating factor for investing in the online, not just financially, even
Right.
just more spiritually, is
Right.
this is where people are.
Right.
And so,
But man,
so, yeah.
you did it, and then it was good right off the get-go, but like it's gotten progressively better, because that's like anything. Over time, it gets better. You get more familiar with it. And maybe because we have a wide variety of audience here.
Sure.
Smaller churches, larger churches.
Yeah.
What would you tell the pastor or the staff, leadership team who they're not there yet, or they're
Yeah.
just dabbling into that? It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah.
So I would say comparison is the thief of joy.
That's good.
And again, I don't know who said it, I'm sure.
Right.
But it wasn't me, but
Yeah.
I stole it. Comparison is the thief of joy. I can't turn and look at some church that's in a different place than we are and wish that we were like something.
Right.
We are who we are.
Yeah.
And I would say to somebody else, I want to be like this or that or the other. We got to stop doing that. Lord, what can we do?
That's good.
Maybe we can't. When we hired a full-time person to do that, there's a lot of church situations out there, they just flat can't do that.
Yeah.
So instead of saying, man, I wish we could, or I wish we could do that, man, forget that.
Right.
What can we do?
Right.
And I think if you start with that premise and then being content with whatever that
Right.
is,
Yeah, that's good.
when we know better, we do better.
Yeah.
But the reality is that we can only do what we can do. And so being able to just say, this is what I want to do. I think that it's important for us to reach people online,
Yeah.
being willing to do whatever that looks like,
Right.
to the level that you can do it.
Yeah.
And I remember, Dylan, back then when we started, Steve is just amazing at it. I wanted to launch some of that online stuff
Right.
way before Steve felt like we should.
Yeah.
And him and I joke on it all the time, like, Steve, why aren't we doing this?
Right.
And Steve was right and I was wrong.
Right.
And he's like, we need to wait. We need to do it right.
Right.
Instead of putting it out early and we're
Right.
not ready for it.
Exactly.
Right.
Which
That's
I think
good.
is
Being
something
patient.
really good to hear,
Yeah.
because, a lot of times you only get one chance. Or, okay, say you do this and it's not as good and then you reboot it, people kind of check out, but man, when you guys did it, you did it, and it was
Yeah.
excellence. And I was at a training, and when we were about to plant the church, and Kevin Myers, the pastor of 12 Stones, largest Wesleyan church in the country, said, the church is the only organization, he said, yes, organization, that produces no results at times, no excellence, but yet gets a pat on the back because we say in the name of Jesus. And, you could break that down in so many ways, but it just spoke to me, because I'm like, man, the church needs to lead,
Right.
Like in that area. God's the creator of all the earth, man. He's the most creative one, and we as this church should reflect that. And I'm not saying that you've got to have this, you got to have this. I mean, God can use anything. He's not, if we've learned anything in this time, the church is not the building, it's the people, right? But within that, man, we need to do things well.
Right.
And that's one thing that we, did our church, pun unintended, the well church, doing things well. But man, there is something for excellence, and you guys have done that. What would you say like the importance of excellence is?
So I would say we can all be excellent in our lane.
Yeah, that's good.
So for example, again, excellence for this person in math who maybe has a learning disability is different than somebody who's gifted in math.
Right.
And I think it's the same in church settings. Okay, we have these resources, we have these people, we have this community that we're reaching. And so as a result of that, what does excellent look like for us?
That's good.
Not a what we want it to be so we don't have to work hard, but what does excellent look like? And you could use that same concept based on where you're at. But I think in general, connecting all of us to it, I think excellent is saying we're going to put our very best foot forward for God to get the glory.
That's good.
And it's easy sometimes for us to want to get the glory, but to say we want to do this for God to get the glory. What does excellent look like when someone pulls into the parking lot?
Right.
What does excellent look like, in the bathroom? Oh, it looks like towels and whatever. What does excellent look like in the way that we think through our services?
Right.
What does excellent look like when we look at the needs of our community?
Yeah.
We're in the middle of, much like a lot of churches on our district and around our country right now, we're getting ready to do a big food distribution.
Yeah.
I think excellent is changing a little bit in terms of as the needs change, the way that, we spend a lot of time doing this excellent, but now because this is a need over here, maybe that still needs to be done well, but this over here needs to even be done to another level because this is what the need is. Again, being able to be fluid and adapting and changing as things go along. And I also think, and you guys know this, you can't be excellent at everything.
Right.
So you have to say, I'm going to be good at this. We want to be excellent at this.
Right.
Just because you don't have, especially some settings, you don't have you're the only pastor.
Right.
You can't be excellent at A, B, C, D.
Right.
So,
No, that's good. And I think one thing you guys have done so good is putting the right people in the right places around, knowing your giftings and surrounding yourself around those who are better than you, and that's crucial in leadership. What would you say are things and because I love your honesty and vulnerability, what are some things right now, like, we got to get better at this? Like, anything come to your mind, when you think about that? Like, you guys are doing real, unbelievable a lot, but is there anything?
Yes, hang on, I have a list.
Kyle, tell us how you're not doing good. No.
I think that you go through seasons where you have focuses.
Yeah.
And so when you're focusing on something else isn't being focused on.
Right, that's good.
And so I think that in this season, we've been focusing on the 5-year plan.
Yeah.
But at the same time, hey, we should be doing more outreach stuff. We should be more, our church has always been focused on outreach.
Yep.
And we've had a huge bus ministry throughout the years and just a heart for the widows and the orphans. It's something we're very proud of. And in the middle of all the, trying to plan a church and growing and things like that, we weren't looking as hard at that area. And so I'd say one of the things, I don't know if any church can say they're perfect at outreach, but I think we need to do a better job of that. And just like every church, small groups is always something that's a challenge.
Right.
So, I mean, you can just put that in permanent marker that there's always trying to get more people connected to groups.
Right.
And then just managing time, managing our time better right now. We have people just on our staff who their wives or spouses are teachers, and then you're trying to teach from home and you're trying to do ministry. And I think just, I think as we have more experiences in this, it'll give us more wisdom to know how to navigate it.
Right.
But you're just asking me personally and being honest. I would say that what we need to do better is just to continue to give each other patience and be understanding, give times of grace.
That's good.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know that there's a answer.
No, I love it. Just honest, because people, like you said, going back to comparison, it kills our joy.
Yeah.
And we can look at one group of people or individual to make ourselves feel better. At times, as leaders, like, okay, I'm doing better than that church or them, or which is sad to say that people can do that, leaders can do that, but we can. But then we can look at another and be like, "Oh, I suck. I'm not doing near as good as them." And it's like, man, like you said, we got to stay in our lane and know who God's called us to be and do what he's called us to do, and just knowing our own DNA, when we were there, or when I was there as your youth pastor, Monty was the worship leader you brought in. Monty and I were,
good dude.
Man, we were roommates and loved that. But, now you have worship leader and Brian, does a great job for you. But see, I was talking to someone the other day, and it was your dad, actually. He was talking about the worship team and all that, and he asked me about Monty, and I said, when I, because you brought me back to preach and Maddie to sing, and I'm looking around and everybody was engaging in worship, but I said, man, I remember Monty, he was there and started to be that bridge to kind of transition the music a little bit.
Yeah.
It took a lot of heat and a lot of just boom. Because change is hard.
Sure.
But man, he took it. And so he's moved back home and God's blessed him. But yet I feel like he paved the way, and now you're just building on that foundation that's laid. That's not to take away from Brian. I know he's doing unbelievable, but that really spoke to me, because I'm like, man, sometimes we don't know what part we're playing. We just are obedient, and sometimes we're the ones who pave the way. Sometimes we're the one that maybe go into the promised land. Moses and Joshua, but man, that spoke volumes to me of just seeing like. We don't need to know what position we're in. We just need to be faithful to what God's called us to do. Jim really paved the way. And it's not what you did was better or what he did wasn't as good. It's just different roles. But man, now you're taking it to the next level. And then someone after you will take it to the next level. And that's what it's about.
Yeah.
Yeah, you think of seasons, obviously. Moses had a purpose. Joshua had a purpose. Saul had a purpose. David had a purpose.
Yeah.
I mean, there's all those seasons. And I think maybe as I'm getting a little bit older, I'm learning to celebrate what I am and what I'm not.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to do the same thing with people, whether it's staff, family, whoever, that not everybody's called to be a trailblazer. That's kind of what you were talking about. The person who's there's no path here, and I'm going to trailblaze this.
Yeah.
I think that we kind of tend to honor those people in our culture because most people aren't. And we're like, wow. And we should, that's really neat. But we also have to realize too that, hey, just because person A over here, person B isn't a trailblazer, man, they faithfully do this.
Exactly.
And we
day in and day out.
celebrate that. And I think in my brain, a good leader is somebody who can celebrate everybody at the table and not just the ones who are the trailblazers or the ones that, because we have a lot of, like you said, a lot of people listening that maybe they're not a trailblazer, but they support a trailblazer, or they're willing to just do what they're called to do and be in their lane. And comparison is a thief of joy. If you're not a trailblazer, man, just be the best you can be.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it all comes back to, you don't need to know if you're a trailblazer or that. You just got to do what God's asked you to do. And like, unapologetically follow the Lord, but man, be humble and gentle along the way. What can I do better? What can I learn? And I think throughout the years of just knowing, like, man, there's something in just staying the course and being faithful day in and day out. Like, it's not how you start; it's how you finish. I remember one of our GSs at this meeting recommended me a book, and it was called Finishing Strong. And I was like, man, GS, recommended this book. Heck yeah, I was feeling good. Yeah. Started reading it, and then immediately I'm like, I know why he recommended me this book, right? Because it's not how you start, it's how you finish.
Yeah.
A lot of people started off hot, but man, didn't finish. I remember Jim Sukra, it's a marathon. It's a marathon. Ministry's a marathon, and Christian life's a marathon. And man, I just think I have so much respect for those who've just continued to be faithful, just day in and day out. Because man, I quote this often, maybe every podcast so far, but like, Judah Smith a long time ago talked about there's sexy Steves and steady Eddies. Sexy Steve is great, looks good, not reliable, but man, the steady Eddies day in and day out, man, they're doing it. And that's something that I've gravitated towards more, because it's like, man, I want to be known as somebody who's consistent rather than inconsistent.
Right.
Yeah, and I think too, to celebrate the sexy Steve also, that sometimes God will bring someone in for a season, and God's like, you're not supposed to hang out here.
Yeah.
Right.
You're here to do this.
Right.
And and you're here to,
Yeah.
and so, and celebrating that piece too. We tend to kind of honor or look fondly on the opposite of, maybe
Right.
how we're put
Right.
together.
Yeah.
But, the reality is that we all have a part in God's kingdom.
Right.
And I realize we've been talking church and leadership stuff here, but just in general in people's lives, I think a lot of this stuff is applicable to them as well.
Yeah.
That, in their life, they wish they were married to someone who was this way, or they wish their finances were like their neighbor who gets to go on this big vacation.
Right.
Or, they wish that their part of the country was more open. And, I think just being able to bloom
Right.
where we're planted.
That's
I think
good.
of,
Right.
we all quote that scripture for, I know the plans God has, that was in exile.
Yeah.
Bloom where you're planted here in exile.
Right.
And so I'm telling myself this stuff as I'm telling you,
Right.
because we all have moments where we're just like, man,
Yeah.
Right. That's a good point. And I just want to, because we've talked about leading in the unknown, but like you said, a lot of people listening, they're not really in those roles right now. So
No.
what would you say about just living in the unknown? Just being a Christian, not really knowing what's going on? Like, what would you say to that?
Yeah, and I would say, Maddie, that's an awesome question.
Yeah.
I would say to be, and this is kind of cliche, obviously, but just to trust the Lord.
Yeah.
And just to allow him to, to walk beside you, to realize even though it feels like you're alone, you're not alone.
Right.
I would also say, I don't know if it would be your social media device or a voice, but that negativity in your life, you need to look at that
Right.
and make sure you're putting yourself in situations where you can be encouraged. I'm just being honest. Just being here with you guys today, is encouraging.
Yeah.
I think we're designed to be with people
Yeah.
and get some people around you that can help you.
Right.
And for us to say that we're we're the only ones that are going through a hard time, and there's power in sometimes just talking through
Right.
Right.
things.
Yeah.
Even though you don't have it figured out.
Right.
And you've always been really good at that, because I remember, being a pastor for the first time, navigating leadership, but then like life, right? Hence life and leadership. And I remember, man, I was just going through, family stuff and, just personal stuff. And I remember just reaching out, I'm like, hey man, can I come over? It was like your day off. And I'm like, I don't know if I'm gonna get fired. I don't know. But man, I just needed to talk and just be like, man, I'm going through stuff. And I'll never forget, you're like, yeah, me too sometimes, And I'm like, no, he gets discouraged. Like he has stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that really helped me though, because man, as I got around a lot of people, I realized that sometimes in staffs, especially, that there's not this openness.
And we
there's
get
not this
masked
freedom.
up.
Yes.
We get masked up.
But that's never been you.
Yeah.
Never been you. And that's helped, that's helped out a lot of people. But, I think, you've always been a team player. And, for me, I'll never forget, we were going to Church of Orinoco, which is a large church, around Pittsburgh. Me, you, and the children's pastor at the time, and maybe someone else were there. And we're going, and we're about to build this big youth facility. And so we're looking at the church to really see what we want to do. And they have this amazing youth facility. And I'm in there. And God is just like beginning to tell me, like, hey, like, Dylan, I'm calling you home. And I'm like, dude, Kyle's my like friend, my pastor, like, what in the world? And so we're in Orinoco, and I'm looking at this, youth center, and one of the pastors said, Dylan, can't you see it? Like, meaning like, can't you see, envision?
Yeah.
And I go, yeah, but I couldn't.
Right.
Like God took that away from me, and I desperately wanted it, but man, I just knew like, man, I couldn't. And so we get back at the church, and I was like, hey man, can I, you stay after? And I was scared to death. It was like breaking up with someone, like, but like someone like,
I just want to be friends.
it's not you, it's me,
you,
man.
it's me.
It's not you, it's me.
Yeah.
But man, like I loved you, and I love that church. I mean, that community, like that's still my second home.
Yeah.
Like,
Sure.
I mean, I love, Pittsburgh and
Chicken Mary's, man.
dude. No, for me, the mall deli.
Yeah.
Oh
that's
my
good,
gosh.
dude.
I tried that the other day.
Dude,
it's
it's
awesome.
It's awesome. Yeah.
The ranch on those crabs.
Let's rabbit trail down that trail.
Let's do it today. Let's talk about favorite foods. But man, I was so nervous, and I just opened up to you, and obviously, we shared words and emotions and things of that nature. But I was like, is he gonna hate me forever? And I totally understand if you will. But man, you loved and you supported me. It didn't mean that wasn't hard.
Sure.
You guys invested financially in
Yeah.
us, to launch the church and all that. Dude, what was that like for you just to, do that? Because you were such a team player from this end.
Well, on the outside, I was doing the things I was supposed to do,
Right.
which is to be supportive of you, which is come at it from a kingdom culture.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we have to choose our actions that are right, even though our feelings haven't gotten there yet.
It's
Yeah.
good.
You know,
Really
and
good.
so I was choosing to do the right behavior. Inside, I was brokenhearted
Yeah.
about it. But obviously, it was the Lord's will. I mean, God has done some amazing things and continues to do with the well and you guys now, you know, with what you're doing now. So, I mean, in hindsight, now it's easy to see. But in the moment, I'm like, man, you know, this stinks.
Yeah.
I didn't doubt that God had talked to you about it because I know your prayer life and I knew He was with you on it. And I also wasn't going to stand in the way. But selfishly, you know, it was hard.
Yeah.
Now, to take this away from this topic and to put it on to other people, because this is kind of what we're talking about, that is, we all have those things in life.
Yeah.
Just like the deal that you're describing where God's calling us away to do something, or we're the person being left behind.
Yeah.
Right.
And dealing with those situations and saying, God, I will step out in faith,
Yeah.
even though I can't see, even though my feelings aren't caught up yet.
Yeah.
Or God, I will let them go, even though my feelings aren't caught up yet.
Right.
I think sometimes we as believers, we follow our impulses and our emotions, and they always lead us the wrong direction. You know, either we're too sentimental about something or we're, you know, the other way about it. But the reality is I think there's times where we just have to say, God, I trust you, leaving the feelings behind and just moving forward. And so during that time, the Spirit inside of me was confirming that this is the right thing. My feelings had nothing to do with it. I mean, I went through a mild struggle of depression because we were buds, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think,
You had a lot on your plate.
but what
Yeah.
helped me too was to admit that.
Yeah.
And I think for people in general, when they're going through a marriage struggle or they're going through something, it doesn't mean you're not a Christian
Right.
to say, I'm not okay.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, a while back, I went through, I wouldn't call it depression, but through a struggle of anxiety just over all this with, you know, is our church going to get back together? And, you know, just actually working even more hours than normal and the mental part of it. And it was age, our college pastor, he said, it's okay to say,
Yeah.
I'm not okay.
Right.
I will be. I knew I was going to be.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
wasn't like I had this dark cloud of like I was never
Right.
going to,
Right.
but like I'm not okay,
Yeah.
but I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I said that out loud, that gave me permission
Right.
to say I need a minute.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's sometimes where people are is we don't want to admit that to ourselves.
Yeah.
I'm okay with Dylan leaving.
Yeah.
I'm okay with Dylan leaving.
Yeah.
I'm not,
Right.
but I will be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
It's really
and,
good.
and that's doesn't mean you're not a good leader. It means
Yeah.
you're human and
Sure.
real, you know. And I remember, you know, I had an issue with my family going on, and I came in a staff meeting one day, and you're sitting there, and you just knew something was wrong. And you're, what's up? I'm like, nothing. What's up? Nothing, dude. Like, I'm fine, right?
Shut up.
Shut up. Yeah. And then finally I just kind of addressed the situation, and you're like, Dylan, you need to forgive. And I'm like, bro, we're about to throw hands right now,
Yeah.
you know? But I knew like that's, you know, what you needed to say. And I'm like, dude, I have forgiven. And he goes, there's a difference between forgave and I'm forgiving, you know? And I know this is different from our topic of change,
Sure.
but I think it's so relevant too, because that helped me. That gave me a paradigm shift in my thinking where we think, oh, I forgave, so I should never experience pain again. But man, especially with family, you know, you talked about, you know, listen, you might be fine from a hurt in the past, but then you have an instance with your own kid, and then that reminds you of your own childhood of why would that happen to me? Why would you ever do that? I mean, you got to learn to forgive as well. And I think if it would change, dude, relationships change,
Yeah.
seasons change, and within that, you know, people are involved, and sometimes, man, we get hurt. Sometimes, man, it's frustrating. I thought you loved me. I thought I loved you, but man, I feel this. But man, emotions are fleeting. You know, all these things like are changing. But man, I remember that conversation. You told me that. It helped me realize, like, man, things are going to change. Life is always changing. That's the one thing that you know is coming, is change.
Yep.
But man, you've got to just seek the Lord, man, and just kind of learn in that situation. And man, you taught me so much about that, you know?
You know, I remember that conversation, and it was something that I was learning too, and still have to remind myself is, you know, as believers, we want to say that when we forgive someone, that's it, it's over.
Yeah.
And the reality is that we did forgive them.
Yeah.
But then there's times in our life where life happens and we pick it back up.
Right.
Maybe something triggers it.
It's good.
Maybe it comes from another angle, and really the concept for me that I got that from was, you think of AA or something like that. They will have been sober for 20 years and they'll say they're an alcoholic.
Right.
And I'll say, why do you say you're an alcoholic? You've
Yeah.
been sober for 20 years. I need educated,
Right.
And they'll say, I'm still an alcoholic. I just don't, I don't drink anymore
Right.
because I know what it can do.
Yeah.
I forgave, but I'm still capable of picking it back up.
Right.
Right.
So the idea for me was, I'm forgiving. I have to forgive because I can think of a million things, and a lot of people can, where I forgave them for this.
Right.
I totally forgave them.
Right.
And now I'm as bitter and angry as I was before
Right.
I did. What
Right.
happened?
Right.
Well, you picked it back up. And that happens. And so we have to stay alert, right?
Yeah.
And saying forgiving. And so, yeah.
Have you
That's
watched
good.
yourself, like, as you've gotten older and more experience? Have you watched your leadership style change, or have you watched, like, maybe because your kids are getting older now? It's crazy. Your little boy Noah's in high school now.
It is crazy. He'll be in high school this. Yeah.
ADD moment. I remember sitting front row, like always, and when you were preaching, I'd be marking my Bible. And one time he looked over, and I had this new highlighter that was kind of weird shaped. I couldn't get my words highlighted very clearly, and he looked over and he goes, "You're not very good at highlighting." I was like, "Shut up, dude."
Yeah.
Yeah. But
funny.
dude, I mean, your kids are in a different season. They're
Yeah.
changing. Your parenting style's probably changed.
Right.
What's that like?
Absolutely. Leadership changes and people change. And
Yeah.
I think, honestly, and I'm not saying anything that hasn't been said before, but honestly, life is about change. I mean, God is the only thing that doesn't change.
Yeah.
Our bodies change, our thinking change, our kids change. I was thinking, without getting emotional, I was thinking the other day, there's going to be a day where Noah's not going to be standing in the front row and sitting on the front row while, mom and the rest of the kids, they'll sit
Right.
towards the back, and kind of hang out because Luke's still a wild man. But Noah will sit right up front. There'll be a day he's not going to be there. I mean,
Yeah.
that's normal.
Right.
It's the natural order of things. But we have to be able to navigate things. There'll be
Right.
a day where we're not going to get around as well,
Yeah.
as we used to as we get older. And so I think somewhere along the line, Dylan, the church has forgotten that. And it's like we've become a museum,
Right.
where everything has to stay the same. And I'm not just talking about music and preaching styles, but just in general.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that, we've got plans, the scripture talks about that we, plan our steps, but the Lord determines our course, something like that.
Yeah.
And the reality is of just being willing to say, God, what do you have for me today? What is it you want to show me today?
Right.
And not being so rigid, being open, to new ways of doing things. And, I parent differently than I did however long ago. I remember when you were on staff, we both like to play golf. I never went and played golf with him one time because I was working all the time. And just the other day, Noah's like, "Dad, you never take off work." I shared this with our church, so if they watch this, they know the story.
Right.
But I said, he said, "Dad, I want to go fishing." And I said, "Well, I can't. I got to work." He goes, "Dad, you always work.
Right.
You're always working." I said, "Well, yeah." He goes, "You don't ever do anything fun. You should take me fishing."
Wow.
Of course, Whit looks at me without disagreeing with me.
Right.
Just like,
Dang.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, you know what? I had a bunch of meetings that day. I had a bunch of things I needed to do. I texted and canceled a bunch of things. And I didn't know if they were all going to be happy with me. Some
Yeah.
of those things are important. We went fishing, caught 80 fish between the four of us that
awesome.
went. And even if we wouldn't have caught any, it wouldn't have mattered.
Yeah.
But I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, so we got
Right.
to cheat. So we caught something, right?
Yes.
But the reality is, though,
Love
that just having that time with him,
Yeah.
Wasn't about the fish.
it wasn't. And I
Right.
guess what I'm saying is that we're all called to grow. There would have been a time, because of my personality, I would have looked at him and said, "I want to achieve today. I want to accomplish something."
Right.
Right.
Of course, what's greater than accomplishing time with your child?
Right.
But so
That's
my
the biggest
point is,
ministry.
that's kind of what you're getting at.
I
is,
love it.
as a leader, I'm learning that
That's so good.
family is more important than a job.
Yeah.
Right.
And, and I know that, and people know that. We all know that,
Right.
but we don't do it.
Right.
We get caught up.
Right.
But
I'm going to lose at this today so I can win at this today.
that's good.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm going to lose at this.
Right.
I had to reschedule meetings.
Right.
We do run-throughs on Thursday.
Right.
Didn't get to do them.
Right.
I'm going to lose at this
Yeah.
so I can win at this.
But they're
Right.
always going to be there.
And they're always
Yeah.
going to be
But
there.
your
yeah.
boy won't always be
That's
there in
right.
that season.
That's
We
right.
don't have any kids, but my
Sure.
grandparents moved next door, and
Yeah.
they're raising my little brother. And granted, he loves Fortnite
Sure,
like Jesus, but
So
we're
does
praying
my
for
son.
him,
Yeah.
But the other day I was going somewhere, and he's like, "Hey, can you do this? Or watch this. Watch my." I go, "Buddy," and it was actually about a scooter or something.
Yeah.
Like, watch this trick. I go, "Buddy, I gotta go," and he goes, "You always gotta go," and I'm like, "No, I'm here a lot actually," and I start getting defensive, like, "Listen, all you do is play Fortnite." I'm arguing with the 9-year-old,
Yeah.
and then I was like, "I'll be back later tonight." Right. And I didn't want to go back over later tonight. That night I was tired, but I'm like, you know what? The thing what I was going to, it wasn't that important. And I don't have kids, but man, it's just that reminder of like, we've got to make time for that stuff,
Well, and a positive to that is there is a lot of negative with the COVID, but I can tell you I've had more dinners at the kitchen table.
Yeah.
I've heard that a lot with pastors.
Than I've ever had. We've done more projects around the house
Right.
than we've done before. And I've spent more time with my family
Yeah.
than I ever have. And I've had other people say, I'm afraid, Pastor, of what it's going to be like when I go back. And they're like, you mean of like getting sick or something? No. That I'm going to forget how important family time is, and
Right.
I'm going to go right back to the same schedule. So, how we look at things is important too, because I think God might be trying to call families back together too,
Exactly.
Yeah.
not just,
Absolutely.
well, there's a lot of people at
Yeah.
church, or man, I was successful in my business, or man, this networking thing I'm involved, whatever it could be.
Yeah.
I mean, anything,
That's good.
that they all have their place, but the coming back to God and coming back to the family,
Right.
It's like the great physician ordered a rest for some of us, and I'm not trying to make light of the issue.
Yeah,
it's
I
serious.
know.
But, and that's what I want to ask you, one of the last questions, man, is just like, do you think we're in a new norm as a church, as Christ followers, just with everything? I mean, what's your perspective on all this going
So I'll
forward?
give you a perspective, but I want to start with I have no idea.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Right.
And if somebody was to tell you they know, then they're lying. They don't know.
Right.
Yeah,
But forecasting, I would call it ignorant forecasting.
yeah,
But, I would say that we are probably looking at a new normal, which the church is involved in that too, right? The way we eat at a restaurant, I think
Yeah.
there might be a new normal. The way that we do school, colleges
Yeah.
is a new normal. The way we play sports, there might be a new normal. And I think the church is no exception. I think that there'll be a new normal. Does that mean there'll be more online? Does that mean we'll always have chairs spaced in between us? How we do youth ministry? I don't know.
yeah,
But I think I don't want to be that person that spends all my time saying, man, I wish it would go back to normal.
Right.
right.
And I'm telling myself that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm there. Instead of saying, okay, we're here.
Yeah,
So God, show me.
Right.
yeah,
Because we can get stuck.
yeah,
And like, Lord, don't you remember when we were in the desert together, Or don't you remember when we were in the promised land? Or don't you remember when I remember when Dad sent me down, or my mom sent me down the Nile River, and it was just Cush now, and now all of a sudden, we can spend those times focused on a season and saying, hey, this is where we're at.
Right.
So now what?
right.
Good.
And I think that's where I want to get to is, and I realize, and my wife, she's a sentimental person. She would tell you if she was here, so I'm not talking about her behind her back. She doesn't like change. Lots of people that way.
Yeah.
Good people.
Maddie loves
good
change.
I
people.
hate
Yeah.
change.
Well, then you and Whit would get along well.
Yeah, seriously.
But at the same time, to being able to say, so my point with that is that we can't, people who don't like change, we can't push them
Yeah,
too hard, right?
Amen.
Right.
Amen.
Yes. We have to be willing to allow them
Right.
to be there, but at the same time, to be able to say, okay, let's not get stuck.
Right.
it's good.
That's
There's
really
a balance.
Good. There
Yeah,
is.
there's a balance there. It's okay to look at, I'm not a sentimental person. Like when we have a garage sale, we just had one, throw it out, throw it
Get it
out,
out.
throw it out.
Right.
Wait, Luke learned to walk in that. Okay, they can keep that.
Right.
Okay.
Like there's some things,
Yeah.
there is
Yeah.
value
Yeah.
yeah,
to not being somebody who likes change. But
That's good.
the reality is, as a pastor, man, it's okay to gaze at the past, or not gaze. What is it? It's okay to glance at the past, but don't gaze at it.
Right.
Because we are in a new normal. We just are.
That's so good. Like what? Yeah, and again, you have no idea. And dude, I could talk to you for 5 hours.
Sure.
I love it.
They'll edit this, so that's good.
Yeah. But like, simulcast, autonomous campuses, live preaching, this.
Yeah.
And I know this is out of order, but like, man, do you think simulcast is there to stay long
I don't know.
term?
Yeah.
Do you
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think but I'm comfortable not knowing.
Yeah.
I think that doesn't mean I go to sleep, right? That doesn't mean I lay in the back seat and say, "Wake me up when this is all over." But I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's hard to say. I just know that I want to be about whatever God's doing next.
Yeah.
And being willing to not just go to sleep in the back, but to, my friend of mine's a fireman. Even if there's not a fire, his shoes and his clothes that he's going to wear to the fire are ready.
Right.
I want to do everything I can to be ready so that if God breathes something new, we're ready.
Yeah.
This is why I speak in stories and illustrations a lot, because of
Seriously,
all the years
it's
I've been
awesome.
here. I love it. But and I think that's so good, because I guess the big thing is do the next right thing.
Yeah.
You just know.
Yeah. And I didn't articulate it that way, but that's it. Just keep doing the next right thing.
Yeah.
I put a quote on Facebook, and I can't remember the lady's name, and it was more on the topic of racism and equality, but it fits for everything. And it's just, until you know better, do the best you can. But when you know better, do better. I think it's the same thing with this as churches. Don't hold, if you don't know better, they knew better and I didn't know better.
Right.
Well, you did the best you can with what you knew.
That's good.
But when you know better,
But once you know,
do
get
better.
on with it.
Right.
Yeah. That's good, man.
Yep.
Really good.
I love it.
So what's the last thing you'd leave people? Living in the unknown.
Right.
Be patient with yourself. Be
good.
patient with people around you.
That's good.
Love your neighbor. I know that sounds like I planned that ahead of time, but I didn't. But the reality is, I think that's one of the things I think people need to see, Maddie, what the kingdom of God looks like.
Good.
Right.
And the way they see it is by our posts,
Yeah.
by how we talk to people,
Right.
by how we care about people, and how we give grace to someone who doesn't think like we do.
That's good.
And that's one of my big things is probably, we all have pet peeves.
Yeah.
Closed-mindedness is one of my biggest pet peeves.
Right.
And there's times to say, okay, I'm not budging. Like, I'm closed-minded about the Lord. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not changing. I believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things that we're just so closed-minded about.
Right.
And we just, because we don't have any experiences.
Right.
So because we don't have any experiences, then there can't possibly be a
Right.
different perspective out there.
That's good.
Just being willing to, to leave the things about a person or a situation that maybe isn't for us, but to embrace and see the good in someone else.
Yeah.
You know?
That's good.
It's good. We've forgotten the act of disagreeing with somebody, but still
Yeah.
loving loving them. Just because you disagree doesn't mean that I
Yeah.
hate you.
Right.
I've also learned through this that stress does weird things to people.
Right?
Yeah.
It's true.
That's true.
Good people.
Like-
not just people you're like, well, I saw that coming. I
Yeah.
mean, good people sometimes, like stress. And I mean, I could put myself in that category.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But stress does weird things
It's
to
true.
people.
Right.
It's true.
It's true. I mean, just the other day, like the exact thing that you just described of like going through kind of weird anxiety things and things of that nature.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I lost a family member, and then we had so
Sure.
many leadership things that take
Yeah.
place,
Yeah.
and it was Sunday night, and I was sitting out there, and before, early on in our marriage, I wouldn't have just opened up immediately to Maddie. It took me a little bit, but man, she's helped me so much. Come to just know the importance of sharing and things like that.
Right.
And I did. I didn't want to, but I just opened up. And we canceled all of our meetings, all the stuff for the next couple of days. We were supposed to, film. We canceled on you.
Yep.
We canceled the podcast. Yeah,
No,
thanks
it was
for coming
a
down.
good cancel.
But man, I knew my soul needed it.
Yeah.
Because before I would have trucked on and trucked on, and it would have bit me in the butt down the road, And we went and we got away, and we came back different people. And
Yeah.
even Maddie, I mean, she's pretty even killed, but even her, she's like, I needed that.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important, just as change comes, man, you've got to know where you're at,
Right.
body, mind, and soul, right?
Yeah. I think it's also important too to know like you're not being selfish when you take a time out.
Yeah.
Because when you take the time out and you get recharged, now you're your best version of yourself for
Right.
other people.
That's good.
So in the moment though, you're like, well, if I take a time out, then I'm But the reality is that really, if you're taking the time out with the right motives involved, it's really not selfish.
Right.
I'm not, I know this about myself. I can be crabby and irritable and just tired when I don't get a timeout. But if I can get a timeout, because I know I'm called to do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I don't believe in burnout. I believe we just need a break.
Yeah.
Right.
Like if you're working your passion, I don't think you burn out. Sometimes you need a break.
Right.
So if I can just get a break here and there, then I'm good. And I always can tell. In fact, I'm getting ready to take a couple Sundays off from the pulpit. I can't wait. But I also can't wait to get back.
Right.
But just having that time to recharge.
It's good.
And so I just affirm you in that, man. You're right on the money there. I think there's people right now that they're a mom. They've got a bunch of kids. They're single mom. It's okay to call somebody and say, watch my kids. I need a break.
Right.
I need to recharge.
Seriously.
Right.
It's okay to say, I need some rest here.
Yeah.
And it's okay to say, maybe social media will last without me if I take a break. Now I realize, sometimes we just need a break.
Right.
Yeah.
FOMO,
Seriously.
fear of missing out, right?
Yeah.
Got to look
That's
at that gram. But man, dude, you've modeled leading through the unknown
Yeah.
and change as good as anyone I've ever seen, and I know you don't speak about yourself much, but I want you to know that, man, I'm eternally grateful for you and your leadership upon my life. And you've been so affirmative of Maddie and her singing and leadership. And dude, we love you.
Hey, love you guys.
Appreciate everything you do,
Love
man.
you guys.
Thanks.
You bet, man.
Yeah.
Take care.
Make sure to subscribe to this channel so that these episodes are sent to you each month, along with our This Is My Story podcast that shares someone's story of transformation through Jesus.
Also, check out our midweek message and worship podcast that's released every Thursday. Thanks for hanging out with us.